All right, so presentation night, DPE Secrets to passing a check ride. Um, since I would normally give, let's see if I can get it, there we go. Since I would normally give a long introduction, I'll just give the disclaimer tonight. So this presentation is intended to increase audience knowledge and awareness for the benefit of safety of flight. The material presented does not supersede official regulations, guidance, or policy. If a conflict arises, those regulations, guidance, and policy shall prevail. This is meant to be interactive, so type your questions in the Q&A box. Don't use the comment box, so David's going to keep track and interrupt me and get your questions answered. But please use the Q&A box for any questions that you have. So a little bit about me. I know the ballooning community is a small community, but at the same time, big and spread out. So a lot of people on these webinars are new names for me. A lot of people, when I first meet them, think I just started ballooning, but in reality, I took my first flight nearly 27 years ago. I grew up around ballooning. My mom's a commercial pilot. She became a pilot, when I was 4 or 5 years old. Took my first flight when I was 5, and really just been around ballooning ever since. And I've seen a lot in ballooning. From watching power line strikes, unfortunately watching people die from power line strikes, seeing balloons in clouds, seeing, I remember growing up and at a balloon event, and pilots flew in a foggy day and having to use the car horn to kind of alert the pilot when they were over a field large enough to land in. So, I just grown up seeing a lot in ballooning. And I've been flying balloons for 18 years, since I got my student certificate when I was 14. Soloed, private certificate, commercial certificate, instructing for 12 years now, DP for over 2 years. So, just kind of have a lot of knowledge from being around ballooning for all these years, and kind of different areas to improve and make training better and make us all safer as pilots. So I've helped over 400 pilots earn their pilot certificates, mainly through the Balloon Training Academy, which is a nonprofit organization my wife and I created over 5 years ago now, in order to help get more people into ballooning and increase training. Provided continuing education to over 3,300 balloon pilots, a lot of that through this LTA Outreach Series webinar with the FAA Safety Team. So always have to thank Chris and David and the entire FAA Safety Team for helping us and allowing us to put on these webinars to reach the ballooning community. So, provided a lot of hot air balloon training and education support to the FAA. Balloon safety and training is a huge passion of mine, and it was a real honor to be, given the FAA Safety Team Representative of the Year award by the administrator last year during AirVenture. And, I'm one of those people that I'm always learning new techniques, always teaching differently. I definitely teach different now than I did 12 years ago. I fly way different than I did 18 years ago. But always looking to kind of raise the standard, raise the bar, and push to learn more and learn how to do new things. So the objective tonight, of course, want to raise the bar on hot air balloon education and training, and you'll hear that from me a lot. But it's not anything that we're all below the bar and trying to raise everyone up above it, but it's just the idea that we all have something to learn and we all can keep learning and keep growing as pilots. We all raise the bar together, collectively as a group. I'm right there with you, always learning, trying out new things, and trying to make the sport safer. So I'll hit on some regulations and policy very quickly, spend most of the time talking about training improvement, and then end with somewhat quick, mainly because the training improvement will hit on it, but just some practical exam information. So questions are encouraged again. Use the question and answer box. All right, so the big thing everyone came here to hear, what's the number one secret to pass a check ride? I remember growing up and especially when I was, all these years training people, everyone wants to know, how do you pass a check ride? What's this examiner going to ask? What's that examiner going to ask? What's the big secret? How can I guarantee success on a check ride? And, it's always been a bit taboo to talk about it, how much info can you share? What can you share? Um, but I hate to break it to you, there are no secrets. So, spoiler alert on the very first one, there are no secrets to pass a check ride. Because during a practical exam, there are no secrets, there are no trick questions, there are no surprise questions, there are no questions testing a DP's personal beliefs. So, what is there? There is the practical test standards. And there's also policy for everything. You can see the screenshot here is the FSIMs, and I have it open to the policy governing, uh, you know, uh, pilot certification, both private and commercial is in there. And if you really want to read it, you can read the policy that a DP has to go through, from start to finish on a check ride of what the FAA says a DP should do. That there's policy and there's standards for everything. And with that comes a comfort in sort of knowing what's coming. Some people really, enjoy to read all that and see all that. And knowing that they can prepare for a check ride. So that's some of the information I'll provide you tonight to kind of help you prepare and have a little comfort in knowing what's coming. So the purpose of the practical test standards, and you can find a current PTS on the FAA website. You can also Google it, Google private or commercial lighter than air balloon practical test standards. And what the practical test standards is it's the bare minimum for certification. So it's what you need at bare minimum to earn a private or commercial certificate. Of course, you want to always go above standards. Especially as you grow as a pilot and continue to learn. But what they represent is the bare minimum to really earn your certification as a pilot. And how it should work is that you're trained by your instructor. You go through all the training. You do those check ride prep flights before, and the instructor is endorsing you to take a check ride, saying that they have trained you and you are prepared to pass a practical exam. So all the examiner is doing in theory is checking the instructor. So checking to make sure that the instructor has done everything properly and has a safe, competent pilot, who's ready to fly in the national airspace system. So, a lot of the comfort for, students or private going to commercial, a lot of the comfort is in testing is that you should, you've already done this stuff in your training, right? You've already done the knowledge, you've done the skill, you've demonstrated to your instructor that you can do it. So, the next step is just showing the examiner, having an independent observer come in and test you and, observe your flight to make sure that you, have met the standards. So, that's all it is. And the PTS, it allows for transparent testing. It allows for uniform testing and standardization, across the country. Everyone has the same standards. The grading criteria and the standard of performance is listed in the PTS. One thing that's, always kind of interesting is that perfection is not the standard. And I know, pilots, you always want to be perfect, but, perfection is not the standard. We're looking for proficiency, safety, and good judgment. And so the PTS also allows for flexibility, and that flexibility comes in different scenario-based testing that you would do with the PTS. So the test that you get should be scenario-based. It also allows for more flexibility when we move to the ACS, the Airman Certification Standards, which those new standards should be coming, within the next year or so. In a short time, we should move from the PTS to the ACS. But it just allows for more scenario-based training with more risk management, factored in there. So with the testing being scenario-based, your training should also be scenario-based, right? So that you're training and you're preparing for your test. So different scenarios make the test different between examiners, but it also makes the exams different with the same examiner. So Of all the check rides I've done, none of them have been the same. I've never asked the same questions because my scenarios have changed every single time. So, we're going through a different scenario every single time. So, it's not something that um, can be replicated and copied exactly. What is the same is it still covers the same PTS, right? So you're still covering the same practical test standards. You're just asking questions that go with the scenario in a different way every single time. So we'll talk a lot more about scenario-based training later. But first, since there are no secrets, I will give you guys some tips for check rides. So tip number one is paperwork is king. So before the check ride can begin, all the paperwork must be in order. So this list is a list that, partial list of things that I collect from applicants before I do a check ride. Their student pilot certificate, their photo ID, their different logbook endorsements, medical statement, endorsements for their 2 flights within, the 2 calendar months preceding the month of the test, the airworthiness registration, and their annual inspection. So I want to make sure that their paperwork is in order because before the test can even begin, all your paperwork has to be in order, and you have to be qualified. You and the aircraft to take the exam. And a lot of these trips that I'm doing to give exams, I'm going across the country. So definitely before I get on an airplane in Iowa and go to California, I want to make sure that the paperwork, is going to make the trip worthwhile, and I'm not just hopping on a plane heading back home, in a few hours. So, always before a check ride, ask the DPE for help. Make sure, you get your paperwork in order and it's ready to go because, sometimes before the test can even begin, this takes the longest, amount of time of anything. The ground portion might be 2 hours for private, 3 hours for commercial, but if you add in a couple hours for paperwork, you're looking at a long afternoon there.
Hey, Adam, I got a few questions jumping in here if you don't mind.
Yep.
I think you just covered it, but it said the average, Gary asked, what's the average time on private and commercial oral exams?
Yeah, so it's usually about 2 hours for private and about 3 hours for commercial.
Okay. What is the medical statement?
So that is, I'll actually switch it. Let me skip forward here. I knew this question was going to come.
Yeah, I saw that one coming.
So let's see, can you see this screen now?
Medical statement, absolutely, yep.
All right, so for the medical statement, so if you look in the practical test standards, this is the prerequisites. And right there at number 3 says, hold at least a current 3rd-class medical certificate issued under 14 CFR Part 67, or possess a medical statement declaring that they have no known physical defect which makes them unable to pilot free balloons. So that's right there in the PTS as far as a prereq in order to take the exam. And it's one of the things that that we check before the exam. So people will tell you that it comes from an old regulation, and here was the old version of the regulation, where you can see that it talks about having a statement. The new regulation doesn't say that you must have a statement. It says that the person knows or has reason to know that the person can't fly while that person knows or has a reason to know of any medical condition that would make the person unable to meet the requirements, for the pilot operation. So, like most regulations, like we'll talk about here in a second, as far as the solo knowledge test, the knowledge exam before you solo. There's no requirement, to have an endorsement in the reg itself, but it is one of the endorsements that's listed in the So with any regulation, you always want to have some sort of proof, some sort of endorsement, that you're certifying that you've met it. So in order to meet 6153, you're going to want a signed medical statement in your logbook, certifying that you meet the standard here, that you don't have a medical deficiency that would prohibit you from flying a balloon. So, and that matches back up what's in the prereqs to take the practical exam. So hope that answers that question.
I think that hit it. The other question we had, Raymond asked, he said it's slightly off topic, but is there any recommended books or websites that are useful as a final prep for the written commercial exam?
Yeah, I'll talk about that here
okay.
in a little
it's
bit.
Coming up,
yeah.
Very good.
Yep.
All right, well, that's all I've got for now. I'll silence my mic for a little bit.
All right. Let me get this to go away again. All right, so tip number 2 is regulations are your BFF. So 6180, these would just be for private. So 6187, solo requirements for student pilots, 61105, aeronautical knowledge, 61107, flight proficiency, 61109, aeronautical experience. These are all important regulations, and it's important that, if there's a reg, there's specific things that need to be completed or logged, which you'll find within the regulation. And you'll notice that there's an endorsement for all of these. And it might not say that you need an endorsement, but in the advisory circular, there's an endorsement for all of these. One common hiccup is that 61107 states that you must receive and log ground and flight training. And the hiccup is that the ground portion there. And most people just get ground portion, logged and endorsed when they go and take their knowledge exam under 61105. But 61107 has different elements than 61105. So this is different ground portion that you would have to log. And you can also, let's see if I can get it to go. There we go. You also see that when you look at 6151, which is pilot logbooks. And in part 2, it talks about the type of pilot experience or training that you have to log is solo, pilot in command, or flight and ground training received from an authorized instructor. So in the pilot logbooks, you want to make sure that you're logging the solo, pilot in command, and the flight and ground training received from an authorized instructor. The issue becomes the logbooks that most people use don't really allow for this to be done easily. So most of the time it just doesn't get done. So some logbooks need a modification. So you have to look at your logbook to see if this is something you need to do. But what I do with students is I have them cross out the first 2 columns in the types of piloting time and have them change it to PIC and ground instruction. And then under instruction received, put flight above it. So it's flight instruction received. So what you're logging is PIC time, ground instruction, flight instruction received, and solo time, so that you match the regulations. And this makes it really easy then for the DPE to go in and see that you've logged PIC time, you've logged ground instruction, you've logged flight instruction, and you've logged your solo time. It makes it really easy for the examiner to see your paperwork. And it's easier on the instructor because they just put in the numbers right there and don't have to keep kind of a separate book or whatever else for the other elements. So endorsements need work. So this is an example of not someone I did a check ride for, but someone that I did their training from private to commercial. So this was before they went and took their commercial check ride. I was looking at their endorsements from private and noticed that these were their solo endorsements, when they were a student pilot. So one good thing is that the instructors did endorse it with their signature and certificate number. So they did all that, which I've blacked out. But These endorsements are lacking quite a bit, according to the regulations. My personal favorite is just the one towards the bottom there that just says "Yep, he can solo." Um, so what we're looking for in endorsements, and that's tip number 3, is you really want to use Advisory Circular 6165 H. It is right now. The letter will change as new revisions come out. Um, but the thing about ACs is that they're advisory in nature. So it doesn't have to match exactly as you see in the AC, but why not make it match, right? I mean, the FAA is, saying here's the regulation. They're advising you on here's how you can endorse something to meet that regulation. So, I mean, you might as well just meet it, right? Than try to reinvent the wheel. You can see as far as the student pilot endorsements there, the pre-solo aeronautical knowledge and the pre-solo flight training. There's a lot of information that you need there that would have been missing on the previous slide, just to show that you've met the intent of the regulation. So before we move on, is there any other questions that came through?
Oh yeah, we got quite a few going here. Ben asked if a candidate is getting ready to do an add-on, is the logging of ground training required to earn an equivalent or lower rating?
I would believe so, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, you'd want to look on the regs, but I believe you need the same flight and ground training on the maneuvers.
Okay. And Carrie asked, how much ground instruction time do we need? So I guess it depends on which one you're after.
Yeah, so the ground training is not defined as far as in hours. The flight training is defined in the regulations. So, just that you need to have logged some ground training, which, your instructor's doing that anyway with a, pre-flight briefing and a post-flight briefing. So, just logging that times towards that rating.
All right. The rest of these are more of statements, but more along your medical statement. Who needs to sign the medical statement, a doctor or the pilot?
So it's just the pilot certifying that they don't have, any medical conditions that would prevent them from flying a balloon.
All right. And then Gary kind of typed in 61.53A addresses operations that require a medical certificate. 61.53B addresses operations who do not require a medical certificate. And no reference to the medical statement other than what he's calling the antiquated PTS. But weren't you referring to the latest rule? Just my question. So
yeah, that the regulation I had listed there.
Yeah.
So yeah.
All right. One more question here says, what logbook do you recommend? Do you recommend having a separate balloon logbook if you're a fixed wing pilot?
It'd probably help, especially if you're a fixed wing pilot flying a lot of fixed wing, just to keep the record straight. It'd probably help, but even the same logbooks that you use for fixed wing would still apply for balloon. Yeah.
Back to the medical thing, what was that current reg you listed? Gary just asked that. If you could pull that back up on the screen.
Let's see. Here, let me put the arrow down in B where it says it. So while that person knows, so part B there has the same statement there. So we're an operation that does not require a medical certificate. So maybe that answers Gary's question there.
Okay. And I guess the big medical thing, that the way I look at it is I compare this to light sport aircraft where they don't have a typical medical for light sport aircraft. It's a driver's license and a known medical condition that they're self-evaluating. And when is that gonna come up as a question? It's when there's an incident, occurrence, or something that happened, and we're gonna ask, do you have any known medical issues? Kind of thing. That's when this is gonna come into question. And with medical issues that I have, am I capable of the flight today? Do I feel for the flight that I could fly today? Now, I'm not flying balloons because I'm not a balloon guy, but that's kind of the scenario for the live sports stuff. So, can you use ForeFlight for the logbook?
Sure. Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
All right. So tip number 4 is train according to the PTS. So the PTS, right? The S is the standard. So use it, right? Train to the standard. It's not a glance at the night before test day document. It's a use every time you teach, every time you fly document, right? Because you're always trying to test, you're always trying to train towards that standard because that's what your student is going to be tested towards. So how do you use the PTS in flight training? So this is just an example. If you take deflation and packing, you see in number 1, that lists the knowledge that would be covered during oral questioning. And then 2 through 7 would be tasks that you would complete, during the flight portion. So there's also, no separation between, the oral portion, the ground portion of an exam, and the flight portion, so that you would still get questions, could still get questions, knowledge questions on 2 through 7. So those are good, places to look as far as, what sort of things do you need knowledge of. But that's how this is set up. And you also use the reference material that's listed in the PTS to sort of, build out the study guide. So for example, just an example, if you flew a Kubitschek, because Kubitschek keeps their flight manual online, it's easy to pull here. This would be some reference material that would fit, deflation and packing, area of operation. So, this would be how you would, need to deflate and pack your Kubitschek balloon, need to be taught and trained and tested on these procedures that are listed here. You can also use, the balloon flying handbook and reference that material that's in there. But again, it's just that, there are no surprises. There's no trick questions. There's no, inside information that only the examiner knows. Everything in the PTS is going to come from reference materials. So, regulations, advisory circulars, FAA guidance, handbooks, manuals, flight manuals. That's the information that where all this is coming from, and you can build out your study guide from there and your lessons from there. So tip number 5 is to use scenario-based training when you teach, right? Because the check ride is scenario-based. The knowledge test is moving slowly towards more scenario-based, right? So all those questions that are open in the knowledge test are, being changed and, moving from rote memorization to questions that involve scenarios. And, it's kind of a shift with the whole FAA, moving testing beyond rote memorization and, even understanding level to the different application and correlation level of understanding. So, when it comes to a practical test, it's no more, sitting across the table from an examiner and having to recite word for word, what regulations are, just because you had to memorize all the regulations and the numbers. It's not about the memorization of it. It's you're going to have a scenario that's going to make you apply what you know about these regulations to that scenario to come up with a determination. So, it's a higher level of learning. It requires you to have much more in-depth knowledge of the topics, because if you just memorize something, you're probably not going to be able to answer, questions that involve a scenario, because you're not going to be able to apply and correlate it. You've just memorized it. So the more you can teach using complex scenarios that build off each other, the more prepared an applicant will be for the exam. And most importantly, we'll have safer, more competent pilots who are ready to manage risks. Thus, this, raise the bar. We'll continue to raise the bar and become safer and safer as a community. So scenario-based training, I was trying to find, where this originated at the FAA, and the best I could find was a 2007 white paper that talked about, research has proven that learning is enhanced when training is realistic. In addition, the underlying skills needed to make good judgments and to teachable. So, it's kind of the shift of, and it's, not exactly a great analogy, but difference between hard skills and soft skills. If you consider hard skills being knowledge and flying skills, kind of the more traditional skills, and then risk and resource management being soft skills, and those are kind of the new skills that have come into play here. Um, and so this change in kind of scenario based training, making things more realistic, and making people, I guess, training people to have better judgment and making decisions, has led to a change in scenario-based testing, and led to what we'll say before check rides of perfection is not the standard, proficiency, safety, and good judgment is. So proficiency would be knowledge and flying skill, but safety and good judgment is more those risk management soft skills, which are also extremely important, and in some instances are much more important than the actual knowledge or flying skills. Being able to problem solve and think out of a situation. So the last updated balloon flying handbook in 2008 has no mention of scenario-based training. Scenario-based training has been slow to catch on in ballooning, and it's more than emergency scenarios. So I know a lot of people use scenario training, of course, emergency scenarios and all of that. But this is more overall scenarios, which I'll give an example of here in a little bit. So that sort of training is, widely not used in ballooning, and not many resources available to kind of show how it's done. And so the check ride is sometimes the first time the students are being asked questions as it relates to a scenario. Doesn't mean they're doing any worse at it. Just means that they're having to think kind of on the fly a little bit, or kind of go through those things the first time in their head during a check ride. So, hopefully getting the information out now kind of gets people to start using it earlier in their training, so that when they come to the check ride, it's something they've done, for months. So this is kind of a traditional lesson plan that's in the balloon flying handbook. It's hard skills, it's knowledge, and flight skills. There's no soft skills a part of it. Whereas this is an example of a scenario-based training lesson plan. So it has the hard skills and soft skills. So it uses scenarios, uses the common pitfalls to dive deeper in the topic. So it talks about, where people fail, so that you have those dialogues, those discussions. And, it's to have better training now in sort of risk and resource management to prevent issues later. So, covering all your bases in training, so that you have something to draw back on when it comes to those situations. So some tips for scenario-based training when you're thinking of different scenarios to use. So use accidents as the base of the scenarios, but be careful to not teach the mistakes. But what you want to do is create the opportunity for your learner to think, analyze, problem solve, recognize the dangers, and make good decisions. So give them the tools to get to safety and make the safe decision, and teach them how to problem solve on their own. So an example of that, we have accidents now the same way we had accidents 25 plus years ago, right? There aren't new ways that balloonists are having accidents. It's a lot of the same things, and our training hasn't changed in 25 plus years. Our PTS, our standards are all the same. So our accident rate hasn't changed, despite yearly safety seminars over these years. And when you look at it and you see what's common in these accidents, most of them, if you just, put a net out to all the accidents, most of them, were okay days to fly. Maybe they missed an inversion layer. Maybe they missed some sort of forecasted wind speed change. But what happened on most accidents is the winds picked up. The winds picked up on landing, which was beyond the expected wind speeds, which caused some sort of hard landing, broken bones, hitting something, power lines, trees, um, but it all came from winds picking up beyond what was expected. And so the question then becomes, how do we improve the accident rate? And so the answer is, through training. So, better pre-flight and risk assessment, and also, let's try scenario-based training, getting that out there more, because, you're not teaching a learner, you're developing a decision maker. And so that's often what we want, when we're looking at accidents. It becomes clear that maybe some decisions weren't gone through fully in the pilot's mind before they made the decision to do what they did. So an example of running your student through various scenarios. One would just be when winds pick up. So if winds are forecasted to pick up, what's your go no go decision? So with your student, you want to watch for, macho and invulnerability, taking chances and thinking it won't happen to them. But if your student's flying, right, and there was no forecasted wind to pick up, and the winds just started to pick up, can your student recognize an unexpected change in wind speed, right? What tools do they have in the basket to help them with that awareness? And it's kind of interesting, I've done most of my check rides for pilots under 30, and I've noticed that more and more are flying without a GPS, which I thought, kind of my generation and younger, we'd have a lot more technology that we're flying with, watches that tell us how fast we're going, and or at least GPSs and iPads and all sorts of that. But what I found is that a lot of people are flying even without GPSs, where they don't have those cues to let them know that, hey, the wind's increasing, I need to change my landing spot. So check with your student, if they have a GPS, if they don't have a GPS, but what's their cues for awareness? How do they know how fast they're going, for wind speed, and how is that, changing their flight? So if the winds pick up unexpectedly, what's their first instinct, right? So you always want to watch for impulsivity, them wanting to land quickly. And to combat that, you want to say, not so fast, think first, right? Have them develop a plan. It's not winds pick up, I need to get down. I need to get down right now. Because that's, when you read the accident reports, that's where a lot of these issues come in, not picking suitable and appropriate landing spots, and making difficult approaches that kind of lead towards these accidents. So, find out what's their plan is. So what landing options are suitable and appropriate, especially with these changing conditions. Okay, so you've recognized there's a change. Now, how are we gonna change our flight plan? How are we gonna get down safely? But not only that, is how are we also how to brief our passengers and crew, right? Because we need to keep our passengers safe, and our crew can also help us. So you can see that, there's a lot of information that you can go through, and this is just one scenario about winds picking up, winds picking up unexpectedly in flight. So, this is just one example. There's a million different scenarios you could play in here, just on this one topic as well. So, you see that there's really a lot to cover. But what we want is to get, safe, competent pilots that recognize, issues and are able to problem solve and get down safely. So there are a lot of resources, aviation instructor handbook, all the, FAA handbooks and manuals, of course, the Balloon Training Academy. We have, a lot of free courses available, a lot of free continuing education and flight instructor refresher courses. We have the second edition of our private and commercial syllabus that are coming out. And the private one should be coming out this week, that also include lesson plans. So not only a syllabus, but also individualized lesson plans for each topic. And then, of course, the BFA, and they have a flight instructor manual as well. Before we move on, is there any questions on this stuff, David?
There was a question from Tom earlier. This is, where does this document come from? And I was a little bit late in looking at his questions, so if Tom could hit us again, I didn't know which document he was asking us about. I apologize about that one. The only open question I have is back to the medical statement stuff. Kathy asked, when would you suggest a class 3 or basic med versus a statement of no known medical issue? Or would you?
I mean, a statement's fine if that's the reg, you know.
Yeah.
That's all you need. So I guess I'll say, you know, the only other thing on the medical statement is as an examiner, you know, not only is it, you know, in the PTS as a prereq, you know, there is a regulation for it. So, you know, with regulations, you want an endorsement for it. But as far as me giving an exam as an examiner, you know, a lot of these people that I'm giving exams to, you know, I've never met before. You know, I have no idea who they are. I don't know what their medical conditions are. And, you know, I'm not going to ask them what their medical conditions are. But, you know, for me, you know, I want to see that in their logbook before I go take a flight with them, you know. Just something that they're attesting to, that they have no known medical defects, you know, that prohibit them from flying. So.
All right, one of the other questions we had, Andre asked, will this be recorded and can we review it again? And that's a perfect opportunity for me to talk about. Yes, this is being recorded, as all of our past ones are being recorded, and I'm working with a group called skillful.com. They're giving us a location for all the Fast Team recordings. There will be a lighter than air tab to go into, hopefully by the next week or two. Definitely by the next time we have another webinar, I'll be able to give you more information. And when we release it, we do capture some of the emails, so hopefully we can get that out to you guys and let you know. An open question did come in. Oh, the document Tom was referring to was about scenario examples. Where's that document from?
So you can look in the Aviation Instructor's Handbook. It talks about scenario-based training in it as well. But then we're going to be publishing a private pilot syllabus and lesson plans with scenario-based training in it this week. So at least I'll have a balloon resource out there.
All right, very good. That's all I have for questions at the moment.
All right, so common areas of weakness as we kind of transition into the last portion here of check rides. So obviously, private common area weakness is aeronautical charts, times a million. And the issue comes in is really moving beyond rote memorization, right? Using the legend, right? Everyone wants to look at the legend to figure out what airspace something is. The problem is again, you know, it's scenario-based training. So, you know, you might use the legend to tell you that it's a Class C airspace, but you know, my question is asking you on basic VFR weather minimums and changing weather conditions. You know, so there's a lot of steps that are missing there. So if you're just memorizing something, and I'm changing a scenario with changing weather conditions, you know, changing the ceiling heights on you, changing the visibility, you're probably not going to connect all the dots, right? So you want to make sure that when you're learning aeronautical charts, you're moving beyond kind of memorization and memorizing the legend to understanding it, right? So oftentimes I talk about teaching it in black and white, you know, not using a legend, understanding the dynamics and the structure of the chart, which teaching something, you know, without the color in black and white really helps. But also application and correlation, being able to take a scenario and apply it and correlate it to the other topics, you know, with radio communication and with, you know, basic VFR weather minimums. So, you know, aeronautical charts is always a weak area. You know, most check rides are going to fail on the, you know, ground portion, and it's going to be mostly, you know, aeronautical charts, largely on private. But also, you know, aeronautical charts is one of those things that everyone's working on, you know, private, commercial, and beyond. You know, there's a lot to them. There's a lot of different things with them. So it's definitely a topic that you always want to keep learning and growing and, you know, learning more and more on. So I know that's probably been my largest area of growth as a pilot from when I got my private to now is just aeronautical charts and understanding them better. But as you see, commercial, right, the same weakness, aeronautical charts. And mainly because it's tested at the instructional level on commercial. So being able to instruct aeronautical charts and really understanding them. So it's a completely different level that you're, being tested at. Um, Also for commercial, another area of weakness is the fundamentals of instruction, right? Because with a commercial balloon certificate, you're able to act as an instructor. So make sure that you read the aviation instructor's handbook. That's going to have all the information that you need to do well on that portion. So again, some free resources here. Balloon Training Academy courses, articles, FAA handbooks, manuals, YouTube. The FAA has a lot of YouTube videos as well, especially even the drone, FAA drone YouTube videos where they're explaining airspace to drone pilots. It works pretty well for balloons as well. Just the more training we have available to us and that we actually use, the safer that we'll become, right? So that the bar keeps getting raised higher and higher for everyone. All right, so 3 common questions that I get. So what's my favorite part of giving a check ride? How many new pilots are there every year in ballooning? And what's the pass rate on a private commercial practical exam in ballooning? So for the first part, what's my favorite part of the exam? Obviously, awarding a pilot certificate, but that's kind of a cheap answer. Everyone likes that part. So I'll say that my other favorite part of an exam is the debrief, right? Because on a check ride, you're not as a DP, you're not able to instruct. So the debrief after the exam's over is really my opportunity to make a lasting impact on the pilot. And it's either if they pass or fail, you're getting a debrief either way, and that's kind of what I always joke is where I earn the big bucks. So hopefully. I'm able to push whoever, I'm talking with that day, push them to continue learning, continue growing, continue to get better and become, a better and better pilot every time they're out there flying. So if I can make that impact, hopefully I can definitely prevent some accidents down the road and keep good instruction going and going and going, makes a positive impact on the sport. So for the second question here, private and commercial practical exam statistics. So this graph shows the private pilot certificates issued from 2002 to 2021. And of course, if we had the data, from earlier than 2002, those numbers would be much higher. So ballooning has dropped off considerably, from the 80s, 90s, 2000s. And it's continued to kind of drop off, but it's really bottomed out there's about 60 private pilot check rides a year. So it's a very small number. So if you earn a private pilot certificate in ballooning, congratulations, you're a part of one of the very few. But we definitely need more than 60 new private pilots a year in ballooning to keep us alive and going. There are way more than 60 pilots leaving ballooning every year. So, anything we can do to train our crew, train people that are interested, and get quality certified pilots out there, the better we'll do, as a community. As far as commercial pilot certificates, it's even less than private. So again, those numbers were much higher, prior to 2002. But really they've dropped off and really leveled off to about 40. So there's about 40 new commercial pilot certificates issued every year. So again, we can use more private, we can use more commercial pilots. We're only about 100 check rides across the entire United States, which is a very low number of new pilots. So the last question there is, what's the average pass rate? So this is the average pass rate for private from 2010 to 2021 is 93.47%, and average pass rate for a commercial exam from 2010 to 2021 is 93%. So in comparison, airplanes have much greater volume in exams, but their pass rate is about 78%. So overall ballooning does a good job of, sending quality applicants and instructing and, getting them to examiners that are safe and competent and ready to fly. All right, David, any last questions?
And Joe just asked, are these lighter than air balloon or fixed wing stats that you just went over?
So those are balloon, except for the last pass rate was fixed wing, but otherwise they were balloon.
Okay. I have a question here on certificates or ratings. Are ballooning and airship ratings the same or different?
So those would be different.
Okay, I was thinking that. Not been around much airships myself, so. Luke asks, I have a commercial check ride coming up this weekend. Could I have a copy of this to review? I will not. I guarantee I will not have this online by the weekend. I've been working on this diligently for 2 weeks, and we kind of hit a roadblock with how this is saved through the FAA cloud. We're trying to get them out of there and online. So I don't know if that's something Adam, you could reach out to Adam and chat with him, but I won't have this ready to go by this weekend. I apologize. And then one of the things Chris Manthey put on the chat was FSIMS, the Flight Standards Information Management System, is being sunsetted and it's replaced with the DRS, the Dynamic Regulatory System. If you guys want to get into that system to get into regs and things like that, he's got the email address in there, so you can just save that. It's in the chat. Chris asks, are there still places that do a 2-day ground school to cover all the aspects that needed to be learned, or is it now done online or by videos?
So there are still, in-person options. They're starting to come back, post-COVID. So most of them are done over the winter months. But yeah, there's also online options available.
Okay. Revisiting recommendations of books / web for written commercial exam.
So yeah, definitely any, FAA manual or handbook, the aviation instructor handbook, balloon flight manual, aviation weather. There's all sorts of FAA handbooks, advisory circulars on, various subjects from endorsements to even balloon flying has a couple ACs available. And then, resources that are available, that the FAA has on YouTube or, through the Balloon Training Academy or what the BFA has available.
All right. Both Joe and another attendee said that the Quadruple A Ground School out of Albuquerque does that. So evidently they've got a class for that. So let's see. Can Adam, or I guess anyone, possibly do check rides in the same trip? We have 2 students ready in the same area. I guess there's probably a lot of variables to that one. I'll let you take a stab at that one.
Yeah. So yeah, there's a list of, examiners available on the FAA website. If you search, I think if you just Google search like FAA designated pilot examiners, you can actually pull up a list of all the LTA examiners that are available. But yeah, I think all of us would be willing to do 2 in, a weekend or a time frame or whatever that is. So, it's tough in ballooning in that we're so spread out and there's few examiners. So, if you're able to, examiner goes out and is able to do 2 or 3 in a weekend or whatever time span, that's just a lot better for the community and the time and effort and resources it takes to get, examiner out there. So.
All right. I had one last question, and it's kind of wide open. This is interesting because I think this applies to all examiners. Do you think some examiners are more likely to pass a mediocre applicant than others?
I don't know how to answer that.
I
know. Examiners vary, I guess, would be, personally, I keep it to the standards, and the practical test standards define, the level of, the grading criteria and the knowledge and all that's required. So, personally, as long as I'm sticking to what the administrator asks of me, then, I'm doing my job as an examiner. So,
Hey, Adam.
Yep.
This is Chris. I'll take a stab at that one because working for the airlines, I used to be a check airman, and then in the FAA, we'd give check rides, and we would have that problem, which, you have to be 70% basically to pass. And that's kind of subjective when it comes to the flight portion. And my criteria was always, would I put my child in with this pilot? And if it's a mediocre pilot, so, training, and try to be that 100% pilot. Try to be that Top Gun, first Top Gun in a balloon.
Yeah, and one thing that I, always talk about too is that, hopefully I'm around and doing this for many years to come and are flying with, the people that I'm certifying or that other people are, certifying as pilots. So, I want to make sure they're safe, especially around me, but around others. And because, I have to fly with them for, the rest of my flying career. So, that also, crosses your mind when you have a pilot that is right on the edge of, not only would I take friends or family with them, but would I fly around them and with them and feel safe and feel like they're competent? So.
Right, great answer. I've got another question from Derek here. It says, how well do you see second and third generation pilots move through the testing and the training?
Kind of depends. Just like anyone, how motivated they are. You definitely see the real motivated ones come in with a lot of knowledge and experience and, a lot of real life experience like I had, seeing a lot of different stuff in ballooning. The less motivated ones are maybe only doing it because their parents want them or making them do it, might struggle a little bit more, but it kind of varies. But, definitely the more experience you have in something, of seeing it and being a part of it, there's a lot more knowledge that you're coming with. And, it doesn't hurt, as far as training and testing. So.
All right. Well, I think we've cleaned out the questions for now. So I'll just turn it back to you and let you close us out for this evening. All
right. So yeah, the next LTA Outreach Series will be June 27th, and we'll do a roundtable discussion with some repair stations or repairmen. So we'll make David happy and hit airworthiness. We cover operations so much, so we'll hit airworthiness for the next one, and then July, August will be off. So hopefully everyone gets to flying and is, way too busy to sit in front of a computer. In September, we'll have, the FAA Balloon SME on. October, still working on, and then November we'll end with Kindle out of the Des Moines FSDO. So hopefully you'll join us for all these at 6 p.m. Central, and thanks for joining. And Chris, David, I don't know if you guys have anything else.
I'm good. Everybody, thanks for being here tonight. And thank you, Adam, for putting this on.